Now for the stories and trends as determined by social media, we'll take a look at what set the online conversation alive, and it's a packed lineup. So let's get it all started with Lorato Tshenkeng, our trends analyst and commentator. Good evening. Where shall we begin? There's just so much to say, just on the terror threat one alone, which has the additional hashtags, the Santon and Joburg Gay Pride as well, attached to it. So I want to, before we talk about how things played out, let's listen to what Mondli Gungubela had to say.
I've checked that with my security unit. I want to say it up front, they're a bit disturbed because they say this alarm has been going on. Up to this point, it has not been backed up by any evidence. That's why we place the matter.
Interesting. I mean, you know, it's caused some tensions with diplomatic ties between us and the US and about which channels are the correct channels to follow when giving out this kind of information. So just share with us how things have gone down and how the conversation was shaped.
Good evening, Iman. So you know, firstly, when the alert came out, of course, you know, there was concern in terms of how government responded to it. You know, with the clip that you just played now with the minister in the presidency, how he responded. But most importantly, of course, there was always an expectation that DERCO, the International Relations and Cooperation, would have responded a lot harder, because we've seen Minister Naledi Pandor almost, you know, whenever there's sovereignty threats, she'd always been very strong in terms of that. We've not seen that. But when you look at social media chatter in particular, there were two things, right? One is almost an expectation that, listen, we always caught with our, you know, with our foot flat. But secondly, has been.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Secondly, you know, the LGBTQI plus community is the most creative, right? So if you look at particularly yesterday and today, one, the confirmation that the Gay Pride event is going ahead, which is, if you look at in terms of the gatherings that are happening in and around Santon, that's the biggest event that's happening. Yeah. And there's been a lot of creativity in terms of people ducking bombs. So that's the almost the comical part of things.
So it's trying to sort of defang, you know, the seriousness that could potentially be attached to this.
Yes. Of course, you know, the most concerning part is it has been, you know, how the US almost is undermining South Africa. Of course, then you have the skeptics who believe that there's some sort of a deflection, or we're being distracted by the US. Maybe something bigger is happening, so they want us to focus on this instead.
I mean, it's really interesting also, you know, the concept of information sharing with the host country before you go public. And we've seen the US go direct to the public in territories in which it operates. So it's going to be interesting to see this diplomatic relation play out. So you spoke about the Joburg Pride, Santon business, you know, they're saying business is going to go on as usual. Let's come then to the medium-term budget policy statement, unless there's anything else on terror you wanted to say.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to MTBS. And I really like the characterization of our economy. South Africa retreats from a fiscal cliff, but there are mixed feelings over what FM Godongwana presented. What was said?
A number of things that you know were somewhat positive out of the speech, and I say positive in the sense that the energy crisis will always be a big thing. So in terms of you know, some funding that goes into supporting Eskom, because we know that, you know, their state you know, makes it difficult for them to be able to borrow money at least at a cheaper rate. So that was a good relief. Of course, the extension of the 350 grants until next year. Of course, a lot of agencies and organizations that are advocating for a longer plan have been vocal on social media. And they're using social media as a tool to campaign for a bigger decision. Of course, the e-tolls was always going to be a big one, where, you know, Treasury indicated that they will take 70% of the debt, and Gauteng will then have to carry the 30%. What was then interesting in terms of the social media chatter was how the ANC wanted to own that as you know, something that they've done well. And a lot of us, you know, have been critical of how do you create a problem, keep it long enough, and then pat yourself in the back, you know, as if you are now a savior all of a sudden. And that was an interesting conversation that has been going on. Of course, with with the outer, which was one of the biggest champions against the eTolls, trying to put their voice behind, we are actually the victors. And of course, a lot of people, because they'd seen that, they'd been supporting their message as well.
Given, interesting how amid all this politics of the DA around her, they claimed this as a turnaround victory.
Absolutely, but interestingly, one, remember she kept her, after she was ousted, she kept her tag or her designation on Twitter as the executive mayor of Johannesburg. A lot of us were always saying, listen, just give it away. Of course, when she won, when the court gave her relief on Tuesday, a lot of us were found with an egg on our faces because, we thought that it would not, the outcome would not be this. But of course, the chatter continues to say, one, we know that it is going to be short-lived because the precarity of the coalition in Johannesburg in particular. There's going to be a programs committee that's going to sit, and they are going to follow the law, and eventually she is going to go. But the comical part, there's one Twitter person who is in the moving, in moving space. Every time whenever Dr. Mpopalatse posts something, he always encourages to say, we are there to move you, whether you're moving in or you're moving out.
And that's really the point, is that, in all of these conversations, some of them very serious, there's always room for levity. Speaking of levity, guess who walked in? I'll give you a hint. I mean, you can see my auto cue. With a sink in his hands and the tweet, the bird is free.
Listen, he had promised that for Halloween he was going to dress up in a sink or something to that effect. Is it a good thing that, the deal has gone through, that Elon Musk has taken it?
And purgings?
Right, I'm not sure. One of the first things that a lot of us are going to observe is Trump going to come back? Because that has always been the big question, right? He has not always been in favor of Twitter banning a Donald Trump, but we know what a Donald Trump represents in terms of fueling right-wing kind of politics and the likes, right supremacist politics as well. So it's going to be interesting in terms of that, what he does. Is there going to be some sort of a gulf between him as the owner and the operations, which then determine in terms of the framework of how you and I interact on Twitter? It's going to be an interesting one to look out for.
I just want to say my prayer to the entire pantheon of gods. Please, no more characters on Twitter. Like, it was bad enough that we went to 240 now? 280
now,
yeah.
Yes.
Please. Less is more. Lorato, always wonderful talking to you, and we'll see the trend through your eyes, hopefully again next Friday. Take care.